The second order in Freemasonry. The capitular degrees, consisting of the Mark Master, the Past Master, the Most Excellent Master, and the Royal Archmason. These 4 degrees are conferred, according to the American system, in lodges and a chapter of capitular masonry. The ballot is taken in the 4th or Royal Arch degree, the same rules of balloting being observed as in the Symbolical Lodge. All discipline exercised by a lodge requiring suspension and expulsion is endorsed by the chapter without inquiry. The chapter has also its own code of discipline for offenses against its laws. Not less than 9 members can open, work, or close a Royal Arch chapter. The Mark Master. The Mark Master glorified. God trusts to each a portion of his plan, and doth for honest labor wages give. Wisdom and time he granteth every man, and will not idleness and sloth forgive. The week is waning fast. Art thou prepared, laborer, for the overseer's award? Hast thou been waiting in the market here, because no man hath hired thee? Rise and go. The sun on the meridian doth appear. The master calls thee to his service now. Rise up, and go wherever duty calls, and build with fervency the temple walls. 1c. Within the heavenly home above. One who hath done his life tasks faithful. Carat, in the dark quarries all the week he strove, and bore the heat and burden of the day. So, when life's sun passed downward to the west, richest refreshment was his lot, and rest so shall it be with thee, toiling one. However hard thine earthly lot may seem, it is not long until the set of sun, and then the past will be a pleasing dream. The Sabbath to the faithful laborer given, is blessed companionship, and rest, and heaven. The Mark Master. The theory of the degree of Mark Master. In entering upon a new system of masonry, the capitular or capitular, distinct in almost every particular from the ancient or symbolical system, a different style of elucidation must be adopted. We cannot any longer look to emblems or symbols as our guides, because there are few characters of this sort applicable to these degrees. Such designs as ingenious ritualists of the present day have introduced are inconvenient for reference, and will both thoroughly explained within these pages, but they cannot, in a Masonic sense, be styled symbols or emblems. The distinction between symbolical masonry, or the masonry of the ancient craft degrees, and this, which forms the subject matter of the present and subsequent pages, is that the one is fixed and bounded by ancient devices called symbols, mostly of an architectural character, so definite in their character that it is impossible to innovate greatly upon them without detection. The ether is controlled only by traditions, more or less apocryphal, which receive new forms, as the fancy of modern ritualists may treat them. Thus it follows that while the ancient craft degrees are essentially uniform throughout the world, the degrees conferred in the chapters and councils in the United States are essentially different from those who, under similar names, are worked in foreign countries. But with all this confusion of working, liability to innovation, and want of antiquity, there is something so beautiful in the drama of the following degrees, the covenants are so impressive and humane, and the lessons inculcated in the various lectures so fragrant with the spirit of the divine word, that it need not be wondered at if, in the United States at least, where the reverence for antiquity is less than in older countries, they are prized equally with the ancient and worldwide system. Almost every master mason in this country is or intends to become a Royal Arch Mason, and a Mason of the Cryptic Rite. What we have said in general terms of the 6 following degrees, the Mark Master, the Past Master, the Most Excellent Master, the Royal Arch Mason, the Royal Master, and the Select Master, we affirm with peculiar emphasis of the degree of Mark Master. Its drama is exquisitely beautiful, exhibiting the work of the scholar, the Christian, the biblical student, and the genius, who, had he turned his mind to dramatic writings, might even have emulated a Shakespeare. Its covenants are benevolent in an eminent degree, being admirably designed for the furtherance of that social and charitable intercourse between brethren which this degree particularly enjoins. Its lessons, as the following pages will show, are wisely culled from the great treasury of the divine word. In brief, so practical is the Mark Master's degree in its character, as conferred in the United States, that its principal device, the keystone, is publicly worn, fearing the same relation to the so-called higher degrees, which the symbol of the square and compass bears to the lower degrees. In theory, the degree of Mark Master is appendant to that of fellow craft, and, could its traditions be historically established, might, with propriety, be conferred upon fellow crafts as the complement of that grade. Its original members were merely fellow crafts. Its lectures describe the manner in which fellow crafts were classified, governed, and paid. Its covenants have direct application to fellow crafts alone. But, by general consent, the degree in this country is confined to Master Masons alone, and a new system of lodges is framed to accommodate it. The title of the organization in which the degrees of Mark Master, Past Master, Most Excellent Master, and Royal Archmason are conferred, is Royal Arch Chapter. In a chapter, not less than 9 members can open or work. The government of chapters is entrusted to grand chapters of capitular or chap-ural masonry, of which there is one in every state in the Union. The altar. The central design in this, as in all preceding lodges, is the altar, surmounted with God's revealed law, crowned with the Masonic implements the square and compass. To an observing eye, this constant recurrence of sacred emblems must be highly suggestive. Can an institution be evil in tendency that seeks the blessing of God through every grade of its advancement? Can the secrecy of which the enemies of Freemasonry make a handle, be of an improper character when, whatever else is shut out of the hall, God is not shut out? There is a prayer unsaid, no lips its accents move. 'Tis uttered by the pleading eye, and registered above. Each mystic sign is prayer, by hand of Mason given. Each gesture pleads or imprecates, and is observed in heaven. The deeds that mercy prompts are prayers in sweet disguise. Though unobserved by any here, they're witnessed in the skies. Then at the altar kneel in silence, make thy prayer, and he whose very name is love, the plea will surely hear. The darkest road is light, we shun the dangerous snare, when heavenly hand conducts the way, responsive to our prayer. The key stone. The use of the JC stone as a symbolical device is peculiar to the Mark Master. Origin ally connected with a pleasing tradition, upon which the degree is principally founded, it has become the distinctive emblem of the grade, and the members are impressively instructed to mark well its figurative explanation. Upon its front are engraved, within 2 concentric circles, certain cryptographic characters, known only to the initiated, but bearing a general allusion to that hieroglyphic bright, on the fellow craft's tracing board, which, in the language of the poet Brother Burns, none but craftsmen ever saw. Within the inmost circle is a space left for the private mark of the member who displays the badge. This is some device selected by himself, having reference to his avocation in life, his heraldic bearings, or such figure as is dictated by his fancy. According to the general rule of Mark Masters lodges, every member is required to choose a mark within a specified time after entrance upon the grade. Such mark must not conflict with one previously chosen by a member of the same lodge, and, being once recorded in the mark book, cannot afterward be changed, save by consent of the lodge. The use of this mark, in those dispensations of benevolence which form so striking a feature in this system of Masonry, is exceedingly significant. Its perversion is carefully guarded against. No Mark Master may pledge his mark the second time until it has been redeemed from its former pledge, and the plea of distress made by a Mark Master, when accompanied by his mark, cannot be refused by a member of this grade without violating the covenant of the degree. Fairest and foremost of the train that wait on man's most dignified and happy state, whether we name thee charity or love, chief grace below, and all in all above, oh, never seen but in thy blessed effects, are felt but in the soul that heaven selects. Who seeks to praise thee, and to make thee known to other hearts, must have thee in his own. Teach me to feel another's woe, to hide the faults I see. That mercy I to others show, that mercy show to me. No works shall find acceptance in that day, when all disguises shall be rent away, that square not truly with the scripture plan, nor spring from love to God or love to man. The 3 squares. In the degree of fellow craft, of which this of the Mark Master is but the complement, the Masonic application of the square is explained. As applied to the person of a candidate for Masonic light, the square expresses that he must be physically, mentally, and morally perfect, to be able to pass the strict ordeal of ancient craft masonry. The 3 squares used in the Lodge of Mark Masters have the same general reference but in a more extended and threefold sense. Here the works of each member are considered as applied to the squares of the divine law in the 3 dispensations: the patriarchal, the Mosaic, and the Christian. The grand trial of humanity to be had at the last day, when God shall try the blocks we offer with his own unerring square, is forcibly expressed, and an inimitable moral drawn. There is impressed upon every member the duty of being circumspect in all his words and actions, and of discountenancing immorality in others, as well as of keeping his own white apron untarnished by a single stain. It was written by the pen of inspiration, under the dictation of the unerring wisdom of the Most High, that virtue exalteth a nation, and it is equally true that vice or immorality, unrestrained, is not only a reproach on any institution where it is allowed to exist, but will, sooner or later, destroy the peace and happiness of the members of that institution. Mark masters, therefore, are taught so to conduct themselves, in their intercourse with each other as brethren, as well as in their dealings with the world without, that they may not bring discredit upon themselves or the institution of Masonry to which they belong. 0. Happy hour when Masons meet. 0. Rarest joys when Masons greet one, each interwoven with the other, and brother truly joined with brother in intercourse that none can daunt, linked by the ties of covenant. C. Ranged about the holy word, the craftsmen praise their common Lord. See in each eye a love well proven, around each heart a faith well woven. I feel in each hand grip what a tie is this that men call Masonry. Blessed bond. When broken, we would fain unite the severed links again, would urge the tardy hours along, to spend the wealth of light and song, that makes the lodge a sacred spot. Oh, be the season ne'er forgot, that takes us from the world of care to happy halls where Masons are. The cedars of Lebanon, Palestine, as a territory, is destitute of forests suitable for building material. When, therefore, King David projected a grand edifice which should be the crowning glory of the reign of his son Solomon, an evidence of the national devotion to God, he made application to Hiram, the Phoenician monarch, whose possessions included the powerful mountain ranges of Lebanon, for a supply of the cedars which grew there in unparalleled abundance. The Tyrian king, between whom and King David there existed a more than royal friendship, readily acceded to his request, and thus the work of preparation for building was expedited. So large was the supply of this material furnished to King Solomon, that, after the completion of the edifice upon Mount Moriah, which occupied 7 years and upward, King Solomon erected, upon the contiguous hill westward, a palace for his own use, in which, so abundantly did the cedar enter, that it was entitled, the House of Lebanon. On Lebanon's majestic brow the grand and lofty cedars grew that, shipped in floats to Joppa's port, up to Jerusalem were brought. The principal groves of cedar were found about 150 miles northwest of Jerusalem, and not far from the seacoast on which the cities of Sidon, Sarepta, and Tyre stood. This suggests the mode of transshipment, which is described in the scriptures. The trunks of trees were rudely shaped, made into floats or rafts, and brought down the coast by Phoenician mariners, the most skillful sailors of the age, about 100 miles to the port of Joppa, the only seaport opposite Jerusalem, from which it was distant but 35 miles. Here they were adapted, by the tools of the workmen, to the exact places they were to occupy in the temple, and then carried by land to the sacred hill. Being incorruptible to atmospheric influences, the cedar beams and planks thus used might have remained to this day, the ornaments of Moriah and Sion, and the tokens of the brotherly covenants that connected the monarchs of Israel and Phoenicia, but for the destructive influences of invasion. The temple, having stood 416 years, was burned by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who was the instrument in God's hand to chastise a rebellious and idolatrous people. The number of cedars remaining upon Lebanon is very small, less, it is said, than 100. But these are grand specimens of the Creator's power, towering in sublimity in the valleys, where they are hidden and suggesting what must have been the ancient glory of Lebanon, covered with a growth of such. Joppa. The peculiarly hilly, and even precipitous, character of Joppa is preserved in the traditions of the degree of Mark Master and a benevolent moral deduced, in accordance with the entire instructions of the grade. True charity, a plant divinely nursed, fed by the hope from which it rose at first, thrives against hope and in the rudest scene. Storms but enliven its unfading green. Exuberant is the shadow it supplies, its fruit on earth, its growth above the skies. Thus no opportunity is lost, either in covenants, emblems, traditions, or dramatic exercises, to impress upon the candidate's mind the divine lesson that, great as faith and hope are esteemed in their effects upon the human heart, the greatest of these is charity. The white stone. Many references are made in this degree to the white stone, the headstone, the stone which the builders rejected, the head of the corner. The whole of this, however, is most impressively conveyed in the following passage from Revelations. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth saving him that receiveth it. The method of vigilance. The vast numbers of workmen who labored upon the temple, more than 150,000, will suggest to the mind some of the difficulties encountered in rewarding merit by a fair compensation to the laborers, and punishing the guilty, both those who idly dissipated their time, and those who attempted, through fraud, to secure wages which they had not earned. These difficulties, quite insuperable to an ordinary mind, were thoroughly obviated by the wisdom of Solomon, and it is believed that no instance of impropriety occurred, during the whole labor, which was not summarily detected and punished. From the traditions in which these matters are communicated, speculative Masons derive moral instruction, apparent, abounding, and important. The working tools, the implements of practical architecture, adopted as appropriate to this degree, are the chisel and the mallet. The former suggests the effects of discipline and education upon the human heart, in discovering the latent virtues of the mind, drawing them forth to range the large field of matter and space, and displaying the summit of human knowledge, viz. Our duty to God and to man. The latter suggests that, in the school of discipline, a man may learn to be content. What the mallet is to the workman, enlightened reason is to the passions. It curbs ambition, it depresses envy, it moderates anger, and it encourages good dispositions. The divine law of justice. In the ceremony of closing the lodge of Mark Masters is introduced the parable of the householder, who employed laborers, as he found them in waiting in the marketplace, to do the work of his vineyard. To each, he proffers a specified rate of wages upon which the labor was performed. And when, at the close of day, he called together the workmen, and, paying them the covenanted compensation, he found some dissatisfied with the distribution, not because there had been any breach of the contract, but because the laborers of but an hour were receiving as much as those who had borne the burden and heat of the day, the householder silenced their unreasonable complaints by reference to the divine law of justice. The closing injunctions. To the candidate who has passed thoughtfully through the dramatic ceremonial of the Mark Master's degree, fortunate in having a well-instructed master and an expert membership, the closing injunctions appeal with great power. In the honorable character of Mark Master, it is more particularly your duty to endeavor to let your conduct in the lodge and among the brethren be such as may stand the test of the grand overseer's square, that you may not, like the unfinished and imperfect work of the negligent and unfaithful of former times, be rejected and thrown aside as unfit for that spiritual building, that house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. While such is your conduct, should misfortune assail you, should friends forsake you, should envy traduce your good name and malice persecute you, yet may you have confidence, that among Mark Masters you will find friends who will administer relief to your distresses and comfort your afflictions, ever bearing in mind, as a consolation under all the frowns of fortune and as an encouragement to hope for better prospects, that the stone which the builders rejected, possessing merits to them unknown, became the chief stone of the corner. The Masonic ladder. The 9 steps to ancient Freemasonry, being a practical exhibit, in prose and verse, of the moral precepts, traditions, scriptural instructions, and allegories of the degrees. Presented by FreemasonAudiobook.com.